Recording in progress.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera, shalom, om swastiastu, namo buddhaya, dan salam kebajikan. Thank you very much for joining us at International Guest Lecture. I'm super excited to be here. Excited because discussion will get a lot of things such as knowledge, experiences, and so on. My name is Informatika and I'm a student of Vocational program at Kesatuan, and I would be your master ceremony today. First of all, thanks to Allah who has given us health, opportunity, spirit of power, mercy, and blessing. Because of His blessing, we are able to attend this forum to hold an international guest lecture. We are honored today to have a speech on the topic climate change, accounting, and the role of financial technology in accounting in the global era. We would also like to thank the presence of Mr. Firdaus Amyar, Ph.D., and Professor Alan Lowe, and also Dr. Nunung Nurul Hidayah, who will act as the speaker at our international guest lecture. By saying Bismillah, let's reopen this event. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, well, we have passed the first agenda as opening, and then we turn to second agenda, singing the national anthem, Indonesia Raya. For all tendencies, please, you take a bright sitting posture in front of the monitor screen. Continuing our international guest lecture to the next agenda, that is to hear a coming speech from Rector of Institut Bisnis dan Informatika Kesatuan. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Profesor Dr. Haji Murmahadi Suryajanegara, SA MMAK, CPA, CA, CSFA, ASEAN CPA. Time is yours.
Yang saya hormati para wakil rektor IB Kesatuan, distinguished guest lecturer Prof. Lowe and Firdaus Amyar Ph.D., respected participants, ladies and gentlemen, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Pertama-tama, marilah kita panjatkan puji dan syukur kepada Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, Tuhan yang Maha Esa, atas perlindungan serta limpahan rahmat dan karunia-Nya pada kita semua, hingga kita dapat berkumpul pada acara internasional guest lecture program vokasi IB Kesatuan yang diselenggarakan secara online melalui aplikasi Zoom dan YouTube. Ladies and gentlemen, perkembangan teknologi dalam bidang keuangan dan akuntansi di lingkungan merupakan isu penting dalam era revolusi industri 4.0. Berkembangnya teknologi informasi membuat industri harus siap berubah dan bertransformasi. Era ini telah mengubah cara hidup masyarakat, bekerja, dan berhubungan satu sama lain, termasuk sektor keuangan yang mengalami lebih banyak tantangan, terlebih dengan hadirnya finansial teknologi atau Fintech dan mitra teknologi dalam beberapa tahun yang terakhir ini. Pemanasan global akibat emisi bahan bakar fosil seperti minyak bumi, gas alam, dan batu bara yang melepaskan gas CO2 dan gas-gas lainnya yang dikenal sebagai gas rumah kaca ke atmosfer merupakan salah satu contoh klasik dari apa yang para ekonom sebut sebagai eksternalitas. Eksternalitas terjadi setiap kali tindakan satu pihak membuat pihak lain lebih buruk atau lebih baik. Namun, pihak pertama tidak menanggung biaya atau menerima manfaat dari tindakannya. Dalam kasus kerusakan lingkungan yang diciptakan oleh industri adanya emisi gas rumah kaca dan emisi karbon menimbulkan negatif externality karena tidak adanya unsur biaya tambahan dalam bentuk social cost yang masuk dalam komponen harga barang akhir. Oleh karena itu diperlukan government intervention dalam bentuk penetapan pajak atau subsidi guna mengoreksi dampak-dampak dari eksternalitas dan kebijakan terkait karbon serta model penetapan cost accounting yang dapat mengkalkulasi biaya lingkungan ke dalam harga suatu barang. Oleh karena itu, IB Kesatuan melalui program vokasi menyelenggarakan kegiatan internasional guest lecture dengan tema utama terkait dengan akuntansi lingkungan dan finansial teknologi. Kegiatan ini mengundang guest lecture dari Australia dan Indonesia yang merupakan ahli dan pakar di bidangnya. We would like to express our profound gratitude to Prof. Lowe from School of Accounting, RMIT University, and Firdaus Amyar Ph.D. from IB Kesatuan for their valuable contribution to this event. Ladies and gentlemen, akhir kata, program vokasi di IB Kesatuan harus bisa beradaptasi dan senantiasa mengembangkan diri. Program vokasi di IB Kesatuan harus sigap beradaptasi ke tantangan ekonomi baru dengan teknologi yang terus berkembang secara cepat dan dinamis. Program vokasi di IB Kesatuan berkomitmen bersama-sama untuk terus mengembangkan skill dan memiliki semangat belajar terus-menerus tanpa henti. Semoga Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala meridhoi dan memberikan pahala dan semua ikhtiar kita untuk memajukan Indonesia, negara yang sangat kita cintai ini. Sekian dan terima kasih. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Right, thank you very much for welcoming speech, Professor Dr. Haji Murul Mahdi Surajanegara, SAMM, aka CPA, CA, CSFA, ASEAN CPA. Ladies and gentlemen, now it's time to discuss the topic today, conducted by Ms. Hardini Lestiani Hernusa, SA, MSc, CFE, AI, EMA, CA, ACA as our moderator. Allow me to read the curriculum vitae before we start the discussion. So, Ms. Hardini is a lecturer at Institut Bisnis dan Informatika Kesatuan. Work experiences head of subdivision of non-governmental institution relations, Bureau of Public Relations and International Cooperation of BPKRI, Management of the Public Sector Accountants Compartment, Indonesian Institute of Accountants, Director of Publication, Association of Certified Fraud Examiner Indonesia Chapter, or we call it ACFEIC. Volunteer and associate member, the Institute of Internal Auditors Indonesia Chapter, or IIAIC. Ms. Hardini is currently undergoing doctoral program of accounting science at PPIA FEB Universitas Indonesia. So, hello, Ms. Hardini.
Hello.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right, time is yours. Please enjoy.
Okay, thank you for Diva for giving me the event. Good morning, everyone. This is the day finally we're waiting for. Today's extra special. Why? Because we have 3 extraordinary speakers. The first speaker is Mr. Firdaus Amyar, SAMA Ph.D, AKCA LCCC. He is lecturer at Institut Bisnis dan Informatika Kesatuan. And the second speaker, the special guest for us, is Professor Alan Lowe. Good morning, Professor. Good morning, Prof. Alan. Thank you. He is Professor of Accounting at School of Accounting, RMIT University, Australia. And then the third speaker is Dr. Nunung Nurul Hidayah. Good morning, Dr. Nurul. I hope good morning, doctor. Thank you. She is Associate Professor on Accounting, University of Southampton. Thank you, Dr. Nurul. Now, before we listen to the presentation from Dr. Firdaus, I would like to read his CV first. Thank you. Dr. Firdaus Amyar is lecturer at Institut Bisnis dan Informatika Kesatuan. For work experiences, Dr. Firdaus is head of the Evaluation and Development Division of BPKRI State Finance Audit and Training Agency to the present. Before, Dr. Firdaus is head of Evaluation, Certification, and Accreditation of the National Audit Board of Education and Training, BPKRI. Dr. Firdaus also has a Ph.D. from Aston Business School, Aston University, Birmingham, UK, and registered as a chartered accountant and accountant from Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia. Good morning, Dr. Firdaus. How are you today?
Good morning, Mrs. Hardini. I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Firdaus. Now, because we already welcoming Dr. Firdaus for the first session for the webinar today, you will have 10 to 15 minutes for your time presentation, Dr. Firdaus, and the time is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator, Ms. Hardini, distinguished rector, distinguished guest lecturer, Professor Alan Lowe, distinguished guest lecturer, Dr. Nunung Nurul Hidayah, distinguished vice rectors, respected participants, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, selamat pagi. It's an honor and great pleasure for me to speak here at the International Guest Lectures Institut Bisnis dan Informatika Kesatuan Bogor. This morning, I'm going to take a look at the recent developments of the role of emerging financial technologies in accounting. Please, operator, can you share my screen? Yep. It's believed that traditional accounting practices that we have been experiencing before the emerging technologies is inefficient, tedious, error-prone, misleading, and costly. Next slide, please. Hundreds of thousands of transactions are manually reconciled and matched. For instance, bank records reconcile against the general ledger and invoices against purchase orders. Since humans are imperfect, this monotonous process increases the possibility of false match. In 2019, Backline conducted a survey of more than 1,000 executives and financial professionals. The survey suggests that only 30% of the finance executives had complete trust in accuracy of their financial data. More than half, or 55%, the respondents were not completely confident they could identify financial errors before issuing their reports. And surprisingly, 70% said that they believe their organization made a significant business decision based on inaccurate financial data. According to a study of Hackett Group, manual processing is the #1 bottleneck in the financial process. Another study suggests that manual accounting processing is boring, repetitive, decreasing accounting staff morale and productivity. However, the accounting profession has undergone several changes over the years due to its environmental natural evolution. Accounting practice is still adapting to emerging technologies in recent years and that are transforming the everyday work of accountants, impacting the professional life of millions of people worldwide. This phenomenon is more evident with the increasing speed of technological innovation. These changes can be disruptive, but at the same time, open up many potential opportunities. In modern accounting, that data are integrated, tasks are automated, and accounting processes are standardized and unified. It's like having a smartphone voice tell you to make a left turn at the next traffic light. Modern accounting is also continuous. Tasks are executed very fast, delivering real-time information for analysis and decisions. Finance professionals obtain clear visibility into the status, progress, and outcomes of accounting activities across the enterprise, resulting in greater consistency, efficiency, and better controls. The same transparency provides investors with an accurate financial story. Modern accounting is also humane, freeing accountants from ordinary tasks. They can apply more knowledge, expertise, creativity, and intelligence. I would like to explain the 3 most important technology-driven influencers that will shape the accounting principle. The next slide, please. The first one is blockchain. As you can see the picture in the slide, the blockchain can be defined as a digital ledger that allows to capture transactions conducted among several parties in real time and serves as decentralized database, which each participant keeps an identical copy of the ledger. Blockchain technology causes a change in the task to be performed by the accountant, shifting from the more traditional and laborious recording to the authentication and original documents. Digitizing current validation processes and hosting accountant transaction on a private blockchain will improve the accounting's data reliability for financial statement preparations. All the accountants may no longer be the owner of the accounting database. They will continue to validate the policies and the entire procedure. The exercise of analyzing and judging subjective values and balances remains necessary because this cannot be simply taken from the blockchain-based accounting database. The advantage of blockchain is that it can be used without the need for a trusted third-party intermediary, being a technology that self-controls through a sequential network infrastructure with cryptographic resources. Next slide, please. The second technology that influences accounting profession relates to big data analytics. Big data analytics can be defined as high volume, high velocity, high variety information assets that demand cost-effective, innovative forms of information processing that enable insight, decision-making, and process automation. These three characteristics that make big data unique are often referred to as the three V's of big data: volume, velocity, and variety. Big data analytics can be applied to audits of financial statements, and it may cause a change in the way audits are executed. Accountants can occupy a strategic place in the world of big data, exploring the opportunities and threats that this technology can pose to the accounting professions. Accountants are used to dealing with large amount of numbers, but big data incorporates other data such as pre-text, images, and videos, which can be analyzed and manipulated. The analytical skills and technical knowledge requested for this type of analysis are different. So accountants will need to enhance these analytical skills. Extracting meaningful knowledge from big data requires not only deep understanding of the data, but also a creative way of thinking about the data. The challenge with big data is identifying the right question to ask. When it comes to big data, the auditor's judgment will assume a much more significant role in the data analysis environment than the traditional audit due to its potential for evaluating a large amount of anomalies. Accountants are already starting to work with data scientists and understand their business. So accountants are poised to contribute meaningfully to their firms as part of the big data revolution. Practitioners will be willing to change and adopt big data analytics aside from the awareness of these upcoming areas. As the real-time business environment primarily propels the need for continuous auditing, practitioners cannot avoid the transition in the future. Auditors' role in the world of big data analytics will largely depend on the evolution of auditing standards. Standards must be adjusted and revised, replacing and complementing the traditional way of collecting evidence by these new techniques. It's necessary to update auditing standards so that automation challenges for auditors and their companies are overcome. A little bit of knowledge of big data analytics is a dangerous thing. However, accountants' tacit knowledge, their approach to decision-making, their inherent values such as conservatism, reliability, and risk adversity must not be eliminated and replaced by statistical analysis and data scientist analytical approaches. Big data needs interpretation and storytelling, which is based on prior knowledge, experience, and theory. Multidisciplinary teams of accountants and data scientists are needed, which complements and enhance each other's experience, thereby increasing the accuracy and reliability of corporate reports. The last factor associated with the impact of technologies on accounting is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is a comprehensive technology and not all of its application relevant to accounting. Performing physical tasks is the traditional domain of robots, but it may have relevance to specific auditing tasks like counting inventory. In fact, the analysis of numbers is the dominant task in accounting and auditing. Accountants and auditors increasingly use business intelligence and visual analysis to communicate results. It is already possible to make predictions based on hypotheses to foresee the likelihood of future financial events and their contingent non-compliance. In artificial intelligence, two specific subjects arise related to auditing: the Intelligent Virtual Assistant, IVA, the Intelligence Process Automation, or IPA. IPA is seen as a combination of certain level of intelligent automation by incorporating artificial intelligence, and other emerging technologies in traditional robotic processes. The focus is on the usefulness that the audit profession may obtain through IPA using the concept of audit workflow, a robotic process automation framework that frees auditors from doing repetitive and low judgment audit tasks and enables them to focus on tasks that require professional judgment. Ladies and gentlemen, the most common anticipated question regarding the topic should be, what are the most commonly identified impacts of emerging technologies on accountants' role and skills? Overall, the main concern is how careers in the accounting profession will adapt and how skills will transform. In short term, in my opinion, job losses associated with the implementation of artificial intelligence technologies will be relatively slow and marginal because these technologies replace only specific tasks, not the entire jobs. Some activities that are likely to be part of the remaining jobs in accounting include performing tasks that artificial intelligence cannot do, such as cultivating internal and external customers, and also interpreting results from top managers and boards of directors. And also, it performs accounting tasks that are infrequent and not ordinary, for which it's not economically viable to build automated solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, to conclude, according to the research of Kroon in 2021, the most commonly identified impacts of emerging technologies on accountants' role include, next slide, please, I think. Okay. Next slide. Okay. The most commonly identified impacts of emerging technologies on accountants' role include emphasis on judgment, advisory function, use data analytics, blockchain implementations, modify audit procedures, information governance, and the last one is policy setter or validator. And on the other hand, the most commonly identified impacts of emerging technologies on accountant skill include analytical skills, basic knowledge of IT, creativity and openness, communication skills, teamwork skills, and the last one is systematic thinking. And that brings us to the end. I'd like to thank you for your time and attention. I give it back to moderator, Ms. Hardini. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ms. Hardini?
Yes.
It's yours now.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Dr. Firdaus. Wow, it's approximately about 10 minutes, just like Dr. Firdaus said before earlier, that your presentation will be roughly comprehensive, but quite in 10 minutes presentation. Dr. Firdaus, thank you very much for your presentation. It opened our mind that the research said 70% managements using not accurate data in decision making. And then we know in revolution industry 4.0, sorry, and clearly we need like to adapt, right? And then the needs for blockchain, big data analytics, adaptation to the IT, and Dr. Firdaus already lists all the competency and skills that accountant needs to develop themselves in terms of adaptation in this new era. Thank you, Dr. Firdaus, for your presentation. And now the session for Professor Alan. Until Prof. Alan ready, let me read CV Professor Alan Lowe. Yes, Professor Alan Lowe joined School of Accounting as Professor RMIT College of Business in May 2016. And Professor Alan, or Prof. Alan, held position as Joint Editor of the British Accounting Review since 2012. In the latest ABDC, Australian Business Dean Council list revision in 2019, it was upgraded to an A. Many of the editorial team have contributed to this recognition. It's really nice. And BAR currently ranks between 4 and 8 in accounting on impact factor evaluation in various publisher statistics. Prof. Alan also held position as HDR Ph.D. convener part 2016 to 2017 and act for Associate Deputy Vice Chancellor, Research and Innovation as International HDR Recruitment Manager 2017 part 2018. Prof. Alan also acts as Dean Research and Innovation, School of Accounting, November 2017 to April 2020, Deputy Director RMIT Business and Human Rights Center 2019 to 2020, and his publication have included 12 A papers published or accepted in the 2019 to 2020 period all. This is why it's part of the significant disruption of taking the position at RMIT. Okay, thank you, Prof. Alan. How are you today?
I'm fine, thanks.
Yes. On this international guest lecture, Prof. Alan will present his paper entitled Fossil Capitalism, Fictitious Commodities, and the Anthropocene Accounting and Climate Change. So, would you please welcome Professor Alan Lowe. Professor Alan, session is yours.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, everybody. I'll share my screen in a moment.
Yes.
But I just thought I'd make a couple of comments first. So my accent is from Britain, which is where I'm from originally. And I must apologize to Firdaus first off, because I confused him a bit over the last 3 weeks with my slight slowness in responding to emails. But I've had a few technology problems here as I'm trying to settle into New Zealand. So I shifted from Melbourne 3 months ago, and it's been sort of a little trying, really. But anyway, it's all good. So look, I'll put the screen up. But just I wanted to say first that as I've gotten older, I've increasingly looked at big problems in terms of accounting rather than small problems. So I started off looking at very small problems in management accounting, like performance management, activity-based costing systems, something we used to talk a lot about, things like that. I've shifted sort of rather away from that into a number of areas, as Firdaus knows, into audit even, which is public sector audit, government audit, which was quite new for me. So it was really great to get to know Firdaus from, I guess, about 2012, when I was in Birmingham. So let's go with the presentation and see how that works. So hopefully something will be happening.
Yes.
And I'll put this onto presentation mode, so I'll disappear. Well, I think I'll disappear. Oh no, maybe I'm not going to disappear. Anyway, okay. So Hardini had made a great attempt to read this title, which is probably asking a lot, really. So again, I'll apologize for that. So fossil capitalism is the main focus, and accounting and climate change. So one of the other areas I've got into in the last 4 or 5 years is looking at climate change reporting, and environmental accounting. So I have 3 PhD students at the moment who are doing stuff on things like water markets and water management and carbon trading. So so this is really about, what it is that makes the world tick. So increasingly, I think the accounting literature, excluding North America, which is sort of not worth knowing about, has increasingly begun to talk about how, impactful accounting is and how we do things on the basis of accounting numbers. So, and that is the case whether they're accurate or not accurate. So accounting is quite influential. And this is an area that it's influential in. Economics as well, but accounting in particular. So accounting has been identified as a performative type subject, primarily by people in qualitative accounting research, but also in economics and sociology. This is something that applies to economics as well. So all that means by performative is that what we say and do in relation to economic theory or accounting theory or economic policy and accounting theory actually changes how we behave. So increasingly we do things on the basis of what we think. The economic policy is best for us. Actually a good example recently is how we've tried really hard to follow rules based on how to keep COVID under control or actually preserve life during a pandemic. So, that's a very obvious example where, COVID has come along and we behave completely differently. The videos you were showing before had all these wonderful students wearing masks, which wouldn't have been the case a few years ago. I've gotten used to talking to screens because I haven't been in a room with students for quite a while. So there's all kinds of things that impact, and accounting is one of those things. Profitability is particularly important, so companies do stuff, but also, politicians do stuff on the basis of what they think accounting is telling us or economics is telling us. So there are some problems with this. So this is just a sort of general introduction in terms of the kinds of concepts that I want to talk about a little bit briefly. I'll digress a bit more again in a minute, but so the most important thing on here is this idea about externalizing costs. I won't read through each of these things on each slide because I think it's really not worth it. So the basic idea about the paper is that accounting actually neglects some of the most important costs that companies incur. And they incur them by destroying the planet if they're mining companies, and in some cases they sort of destroy them by polluting water and polluting air. Now, we're moving, at least in the West, I'm not so sure about Indonesia, to a situation where companies don't get away with it quite as easily as they used to. But in Australia, they're certainly used to getting away with polluting rivers and streams and using water when they shouldn't be using it. But that's another story. So the bottom point on the slide is suggesting that what we could do a lot better with accounting if we actually change the way we calculate profit, actually quite controversially and quite markedly. So I'm going to sort of refer to carbon pricing a bit later, which is quite controversial in Australia, not so much in New Zealand. So this is the structure of the paper broadly that I'm talking to. So I'm talking about a paper that's been written, it's in draft, which covers these kinds of things. In the presentation, I won't go through all of this in great detail. We'll see how that works out. So I mentioned COVID. I think I don't really need to say much about this in terms of the first 2 points. Maybe. So COVID-19 has brought home some alarming truths. Bullet point 2. They're about how much higher mortality rates are amongst the poor, as opposed to the wealthy. How much higher mortality rates are in the third world or developing world than they are in the West, and of course that's still a problem because of access to vaccines. And those things, those things are quite difficult. Even when vaccines are manufactured in the third world, they tend not to be distributed as they might be. So I'm picking a bigger problem. So COVID is it's of interest, but it's not a main issue in the paper now. The main point is this one, is the last couple of points about climate change and human life on Earth. So, I mean, you know, I don't know how many of you guys believe that climate change is as imminently dangerous or catastrophic as I do now. I mean, I have grandchildren who, you know, may not see the world as I've seen it over my lifetime, because there will be, well, I mean, eventually there'll be a lot fewer people, but there'll be an awful lot less green space, and there'll be an awful lot more problems with migration of people, which we're already complaining about now in some countries. So I thought I'd introduce a little bit about Australian climate policy or politics. So this is Scott Morrison. It's actually a really, really nice picture of Scott Morrison because he doesn't look this interesting. He's actually quite a sour guy, and you almost never see him smiling properly. The person on the broomstick, of course, is the famous teenage climate change protester from, I don't know, is it Sweden or Norway? I can't remember. Anyway, so, I mean, I guess we all know about COP26 because it only just happened. It was incredibly disappointing for climate change concerned people. I did follow where some of the, you know, the camps, some of the countries were in, and I can't remember if Indonesia is in the bad camp. India is definitely in the bad camp. Saudi Arabia is definitely in the bad camp, and Australia is in the bad camp. But I should have looked at this, but I didn't. So this is starting to talk about, you know, where Australia has come from in terms of where Australia is in terms of its policies. And this is sort of, you know, this was a big announcement a year ago about how best to recover from COVID. And so the best the Australian government could come up with was that we should prioritise gas, which is quite strange in a country like Australia where it's sunny almost all the time in at least 60–80% of the country. So the possibilities of natural, you know, resources in terms of wind power, but particularly sun, is absolutely enormous. So there is currently an enormous project to produce electricity from from the sun and transport it to Singapore. Even it's like 30 billion Australian dollars, I think. So this is controversial. This was controversial. So this is a famous tourist landmark in Victoria, where Melbourne is. This is only about 40–50 minutes from Melbourne. The little tiny specks on the beach could be people, because this is a huge rock formation. It's called the 12 Apostles, although there are not 12 of them now. But actually give it 30 or 40 years and there could be 12 again. Who knows? And this is where the cartoon came from. So this is 18 months, 2 years ago, when Scott Morrison, who does look like this, so this is Scott Morrison, the Australian Prime Minister, taking a piece of coal into the Australian Parliament to explain to the MPs that they shouldn't be frightened of coal. So I'm not sure what your sense of humor is like in Indonesia on this kind of thing, but this was meant to be, you know, a clever trick where the Prime Minister talked about, you know, this is coal and it's really important that you shouldn't worry about it, while showing it off to the opposition benches. So nobody, of course, was frightened of it. They're just frightened of what it does when you burn too much of it. Well, we burnt too much of it. I'm taking license here. So again, you know, Australia's been sort of in the news quite a bit more than usual, partly because of some of the statements that we've made about China, but that's another story, dangerous politics. There were some really enormous bushfires in 2020 and the start of 2020, really just before the pandemic hit in Australia. This is a sort of relatively standard photo 3 billion animals killed or displaced. I've seen some of the areas that were burnt, and it's quite remarkable. And this is sort of just to put it into perspective, like we like numbers as we're accountants. So the bushfires went on from late 2019 into 2020, so maybe 2.5 months. And you can see this remarkable picture of how that compares to a number of major fires around the region. I was really quite shocked when I saw this, because I think of the Amazon as being the worst place you could possibly be at the moment. Although I have heard of Singaporeans complaining about Indonesian fires, but we probably shouldn't say too much about that. So quite remarkable stuff. So these are the key issues in the paper. So this idea about the Anthropocene, I should talk about briefly. So the first couple of points on the slide here. So this is argued to be the period we're in now. So we're not in a geographical period, a geological period of the Earth's existence in the morning. We're in a human affected period, hence the title Anthropocene, to refer to human, if you like, human engineering has made the world very different to what it was in the past, in the same way that geological periods used to do that previously. So now we're in a period where, again, some people regard this as controversial, but I mean, a lot of writers have picked up this term of Anthropocene because human changes, of course, such a major shift in the way the Earth's future is looking. Rising oceans, heating, climate heating, and so on. So I've come back here to there's a couple of comments on here about profit, and then there's the last 2 bullet points on externalities. So hopefully this will start to make sense. So I mentioned carbon before. So there's a lot of these things that accounting doesn't do. So accounting does not measure, some of the most important costs that companies incur, which include pollution, include air quality, include use of resources that they dig out of the ground and normally pay nothing for. That's not quite the case in Australia, but we won't spend too much time on that. So we regard all this stuff as externalities, and typically we don't involve them in the accounting system at all. So all I'm saying on the bottom of this slide is, if we knew if we were actually being sensible, we would have a carbon-based tax system. So we'd price carbon and we'd include it in taxation, or we'd include it in, cost per ton of coal or whatever, or oil, barrels of oil. We don't do that. We do carbon markets because it's not acceptable to include this in the tax system. This is, again, a political question. Again, this is just referring back to, this is referring back to the pandemic and talking about, well, one of the most remarkable things we saw was I don't know about your news, obviously, in Indonesia, but what happened here was we got enormous amounts of coverage showing how different cities were doing in terms of air quality. So in China in particular, but also through India and through Europe. I can't remember seeing one including Jakarta, but probably I just missed it. So the pandemic, of course, did all kinds of really unpleasant things. But one of the things it did do, which was interesting, was indicate how, climate can be improved dramatically. Air quality can be improved dramatically if we weren't using so much coal and oil. And of course, a lot of countries have are taking this increasingly seriously, but probably not fast enough. Vested interests and wealth inequality. I think I don't need to talk to you guys about that because I'm sure you're sort of fully aware. So these are, I just thought we'd go back to a few more pictures, just some of this nice stuff about, I assume this is quite a recent picture, but I didn't check that. So, this is why we've got this threat of global warming, rising sea levels. And actually, it's much worse than we thought, you know. So this idea about, so Australia is there's going to be lots of places in Australia that are not livable. I mean, there's already a lot of desert in Australia, but there'll be lots of problems even around the coast in Australia if we get 2 degrees or 2.5 degrees warming. I thought you might like this one, since this is a sort of an educational event. So this is based on the idea, which, like everything else, is about money. So this is about fossil fuel companies putting money into STEM education and biasing what it is we teach. Now, I mean, there are all kinds of examples of this. It's not just fossil fuel, but obviously fossil fuel is what we're worried about. Pharma companies do exactly the same thing. So pharmaceutical companies, you know, spend a lot of money to make themselves look good. I've put a couple of references on here so you can have a look at this stuff if you're interested. But I sort of just love the picture. It's like spoon feeding a child, yeah, ideas about how great fossil fuels are. So this is slightly more academic. So this is a suggestion about how, you know, if you take a longer view, this is hard for most of us to do because, you know, I'm getting quite old now, so I've seen some things change and then reverse, you know, so you get used to governments doing, well, sorry, in my experience, I've gotten used to governments in countries that I know, like UK, US, and Australia doing stupid things, you know, over quite a long period of time. I mean, if you don't follow the UK news, you won't know how stupid the current Prime Minister is. But, you know, he's pretty laughable. But it's not in a funny way, really. He's got quite a lot of problems on at the moment. This is talking about how we lose track of what's really going and how history can tell us a bit more about, you know, how the free markets worked and how, you know, how it's regulated, deregulated. So, I mean, there's great evidence of this in the US, you know, where we get enormous bankruptcies, we get huge, you know, financial problems as they deregulate their markets. And of course, the GFC was just purely about the US exporting financial crisis to the rest of the world. There was no financial crisis in the rest of the world until, you know, the markets fell apart and some of their banks fell apart. And then that just had a domino effect around the rest of the world. I hope you're not sending this recording to anybody I wouldn't like it to go to. So, but this slide is just finishing by saying that, you know, accounting actually has an important role to play here. And so, you know, if we did calculate profit differently, or we did include different costs, fossil company profits would look completely different. It's not completely clear why, you know, values of fossil fuel companies on stock exchanges have not fallen more than they have now, but that's a different story that I can't afford to digress onto today. So I'm getting into the, you know, the sort of the main part of the paper now, which is about these sort of things in terms of, you know, what is it we do when we're worrying about growth? We worry about growth all the time. It's the most important thing to politicians to worry about. And of course, the pandemic's put a particular focus on that. So that's another thing where we didn't really, you know, nobody was thinking, oh, there'll be a pandemic and there'll be no growth. You know, GDP will be static because what are we going to do? Well, we're going to have to hide inside and wear masks and not go to the office or go to our workplaces. So, I mean, there's a huge impact on growth, but actually not as bad as a lot of people predicted early on. So we've not done too badly, I think. I'm not sure the situation in China, but they're still giving reasonable growth figures. This internalization of externalized costs is a very old topic in accounting. So this goes back to at least the late 80s or mid 80s. This idea about profit is not really accurate. We need to include more things. Otherwise, what are we going to do? Now, back in the 92, and the late 80s, we actually didn't know enough about carbon and about the dangers. Well, some people did, scientists, a lot of scientists knew quite a bit about the dangers, but we didn't really know that much about carbon, what carbon was costing us, what putting carbon into the atmosphere was costing us. Now we have a much better idea now. We have a very good idea how to price carbon, and we know what dangers, what problems it's causing. So I said that, and maybe we don't need to worry about this. I mean, obviously, the United Nations has been very focused on climate problems for a long time, the IPCC. And Thomas Piketty, if you haven't come across Thomas Piketty, I'm sure some of you will have. He's a French guy who I think works in the States now, who wrote an incredible book, which was sort of like an update on Karl Marx Capital. So it's got capital in the title. Oh, sorry, the last bullet point says, see the chart next. Here's the chart. So, I mean, again, nobody's really seriously questioning this now. Nobody with any intelligence is seriously questioning this now. I mean, a lot of money has been spent challenging these numbers on climate change and climate projection, but that's really fallen away now. So there's still a lot of pushback on, you know, climate mitigation efforts, you know, switching to renewables, moving away from coal and oil, blah, blah, blah. But nobody's really saying that the information is incorrect. They're actually saying, well, it doesn't really matter that much because it will just kill all the poor people. Yeah. So we're not too worried. I think actually it's a bit short-sighted, but anyway. Social equity. So I've talked about this now a couple of times. Naomi Klein is a very, very famous US writer who's regarded as a bit of a strange woman because she talks too much and argues with everybody she can find. So what she's saying here back in 2014 is, you know, there's a connection between these things: low wages, poor employment conditions, high pollution and externalities, because companies don't want to take it seriously. They don't want to pay better wages, but most particularly, they don't want to do anything about pollution because it's going to cost them money. So that, you know, okay, growth and well, I won't, yeah, this is more, so I'm a big Bruno Latour fan. So if you've never heard of Bruno Latour, check him out. So he got famous by talking about the development of science and technology, but he takes quite an unusual view. Let's leave it at that. But he's sort of responsible for a theory, actor network theory, that's been quite big in accounting and also in management. But he's sort of, in the last 10 years, I haven't seen him writing, he's hardly written anything that's not been on the climate. So he's written an awful lot of stuff on the climate, and he's become quite a famous guy for sort of public speaking. Well, you know, what can we say? So, I mean, this first bullet point includes China and Indonesia, but 80% of carbon since 1751 has been emitted by OECD countries, primarily Western. I think China can't be in the OECD, can it? I'm not sure now. I should have checked that out. Okay, let's move on. How long have I got? 10? 5?
10 minutes more, Prof. Alan.
5, okay. Oh, sorry, 10. Excellent, okay.
Yeah.
So I've added this. This is quoting or referring to Polanyi again, who's again a sort of famous social philosopher guy. So he's defining some of this stuff here. So he's saying, you know, things like labor and natural resources are fictitious commodities because we make them commodities when they're not really. So they're not infinite, and they're not infinitely divisible. So this isn't like agriculture. It's not like growing grain. And more recently, it's become obvious that we can talk about this in relation to water and air quality as well, because of the levels of pollution that we've got. But I mentioned the air quality before because that was primarily an indicator of air pollution, but also of burning fossil fuels. So the reduction in production in China, particularly, but also in other countries all around the world, improved air quality dramatically in a matter of weeks, like 10, 12 weeks, and air quality was fantastic. It was really quite peculiar. But the idea here is that these things are not really, shouldn't be treated as commodities because they can't just be renewed. And I think, there's a philosophical argument here about treating labor as a commodity anyway. But this is a very long argument about what people should be paid, or, what they're worth, et cetera, or how much they're exploited. So anyway, some stuff to think about there. I mentioned earlier that accounting is performative, and there's another big area in the literature that talks about or writes about these ideas of calculated practices and how these two things are related. That we, in accounting, we calculate stuff, we make predictions, or we distribute performance measures and accounting statements. Any of you guys that work in universities will be very familiar, I would think, with performance measurement in universities. Certainly, it's quite an invasive practice in Australia, and people, academics in Australia, work much harder on teaching than they used to do, say 10, 12, 15 years ago. You guys, I imagine, are already working pretty hard. Would be my guess. But these things are, where we've introduced performance measurement systems and we make people work harder. Yeah, we make people work harder by observing what they do and like telling them off or firing them when they're not doing the job properly. One of the biggest manufacturing companies that supplies Apple is called a name I can't remember. Anybody help me out? Chinese company manufactures Apple phones. No, it's got like an American name, but it's a Chinese company. Anyway, I mean, there's been a lot of issues at that company because workers have been jumping off rooftops to kill themselves. And so the company have put nets around the top of their buildings so that it's more difficult for employees to jump off and kill themselves. And that's to do, I understand, from excess hours of work, overtime, forced overtime, lack of holidays and so on. But there's lots of examples of companies that have been peculiar. So Enron, again, like most of you will have come across, I mentioned the idea that the US is really good at exporting financial crises and damage. WorldCom the same. So, I mean, these are companies that go bankrupt, and it doesn't just affect in the US necessarily, but the GFC was a really spectacular example. Conclusion. That's marvelous. So I've got here, which I think is really good, because there's been a lot of political talk about living with COVID, returning to normal. And, of course, politicians really like to think that this is what people want. In New Zealand, it's very, very clear, and to a similar extent in Australia, it's very, very clear that a lot of people don't want to return to normal while COVID's still around. So there's a lot of people in New Zealand, particularly, pushing back against the government's latest decision 2 or 3 weeks ago to open the country back up and to release people from the geographical sort of boundaries that they've been encased in. So Auckland has been locked down for 3.5 months now. It will open up on the 15th. So that means people can't leave the city. So they're not allowed to go see relatives or friends at all. And that's been the case for 3.5 months. So it's all going to go crazy. 15th of December, don't come to New Zealand. Actually, I think you can't come to New Zealand, so it's all fine. So I've put here this climate change and COVID a warning sign. So, you know, I mean, it depends how you look at this. There's a pretty strong, well, there's a very strong argument that climate change is about human activity. It has been suggested that pandemics are also a result of human activity and changes in the way we deal with food. Now, we know where the direct link is there with China, if you accept the story that COVID started in a wet food market. So these are things where, you know, human activity has created, you know, dangers. The problem in today's world is that the dangers are magnified like 1,000-fold by international travel, which I used to really love taking part in. So I know we have lost a lot in what was normal, but there is a really good question about whether going back to what was the prior normal is at all sensible. But I guess the point of the story here and the paper is that, you know, what we're trying to say in the paper is that, you know, we've had this warning, and now we've had two in very close proximity, really. I mean, COVID has really been dramatic. I mean, certainly nothing like COVID's happened in my lifetime. And to the best of my knowledge, it's never happened. So the Spanish flu, which was famous in the West because it killed a lot of people in Western countries, didn't kill anything like the proportion of the population that COVID has killed. And that's when people think they know what they're doing. In 1918, nobody knew what they were doing in trying to deal with a pandemic. Okay, so I don't know. I mean, I think the last bit is pretty obvious. I mean, amongst other things, we need a bit of give and take between developed countries and less developed countries. I'm sure that will be an easy one to agree with. But you know, how we do this is really not clear. Modern Western governments have gotten very, very attracted to not taxing people and not taxing companies. And of course, part of the excuse for that is that they need to tax companies less because you guys in LDCs, lesser developed countries, are competing and they're not enjoying it. Anyway, okay. I think that's about it. I did have a thing on here for questions, but I'm not sure we're going to do them because this is the biggest event I've ever been on by a long way, but it feels like I'm just talking to a screen. Anyway, thanks so much for your attention.
Thank you, Prof. Alan. Well, that's the challenge in pandemic, right? We have a webinar, but within the screen. But it's okay, because it's the adaptation again, adapt to the new normal.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, you're onto it.
Than the prior normal. Thank you very much, Prof. Alan, for your presentation. I think we all agree that we need more aware to the climate change, global warming, and then in the presentation, you also say that we do as an accountant have a roles in fossil capitalism, which is we have to maybe adapt or make new changes, yeah, in terms of evaluate or trying to make accounting management maybe within the fossil or something, right?
Yeah, could I just say, I mean, I think it's worth pointing out, I mean, I've been very big picture here and I didn't say much about accounting directly, and that's because I think it's unfair. The emphasis, I mean, there are things accountants could be doing, but I mean, this is really something for, you know, for protesters, but you know, most particularly for politicians and for the population in general. I mean, we need to just be more aware about climate change and sort of talk to people we know who maybe don't take it so seriously, because I think it's pretty serious at this point.
It's true.
Sorry.
Oh, it's serious. I do agree. And we need to collaborative movement, right, Prof. Alan, not only for developing countries and also developed countries. So this is just like sustainable development goals that no one left behind. This is all matters, all problems now, not only government, but all of a role to mitigate this pandemic and to the sustainability of our world together. Thank you, Prof. Alan. Now this, I hope you can stay for a while for the question and answer session, because you can see at the chat room, that's a lot of chat question from the attendee, right? About like, I think it's already 20 questions there.
I'll just go and get another drink, but thanks so much, and I'll be around for at least another half an hour or so.
Thank you, Prof. Alan. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, now the last session, but not the least, is our third presenter, Dr. Nunung Nurul Hidayah. But please let me read her previous CV first. Yes, Dr. Nunung Nurul Hidayah joined Southampton Business School in September 2019. Previously, Dr. Nurul worked as a lecturer at the accounting department of Aston Business School from September 2014. Previous academic and administrative position, such as external examiner for Queen Mary University of London from November 2021, external examiner University of Leicester, November 2020 to March 2021, lecturer at Aston Business School, Aston University from September 2014 to August 2019, Ph.D. research scholar and part-time lecturer, Aston Business School, Aston University, October 2011 to Augustus 2014, head of accounting department, University of Al-Azhar, Indonesia, 28 to 2011, and full-time lecturer and managing editor of accounting and economic journal, University of Al-Azhar, Indonesia, 2004 to 2011. Now, would you please join me in welcoming Dr. Nunung Nurul Hidayah? Time is yours, Dr. Nunung.
Thank you, Hardini. Good morning, everyone. It's early morning here. At the moment, it's 4:12 in the UK. Yeah, so let me try to share my screen.
3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, 4 o'clock in the morning.
4 o'clock in the morning.
I've already, actually, the story is I've already refused to but because of Firdaus, I cannot say no. He's very insisted for me to come. So since three of us, Ellen, Firdaus, and me, haven't met in a forum for a long time. So this is a very short presentation I've ever made. So because I refused already initially, 3 o'clock in the morning is too much. And he called me at 2:45 this morning to wake me up. So I hope I can you can see my face now. That is still very early here. And Firdaus asked me to share how it is in the UK in terms of COVID and the impact on the two things that I've done so far. Auditing and Islamic financial institution, what has happened, and at the same time, I chose to look at crisis and multiple failures of accountability regimes, because at the moment I'm working on two projects. So one project is still what I would share in this forum is perhaps still very preliminary in terms of the findings. So I don't have paper at the moment for this development of the paper, yes. I've been funded together with Gajah Mada University by the Indonesian government through Risprodikti to do research to look at the role of philanthropic organization during crisis in Indonesia. And at the same time, recently, about a month ago, we got funded by Financial Reporting Council to look at the audit report in the UK. So maybe part of the ideas on layers of accountability and where the accountability shifted during crisis is partly from my project in Indonesia, and the other part on auditing is from the UK. But the basis of my presentation would be the case in the UK. So yesterday evening, Ellen mentioned a little bit about how great the leader in the UK is at the moment. So we were informed at 6 o'clock in the morning, in the evening yesterday that everyone was asked to work from home again from 13th of December. When last week we had the longest press conference made by the Prime Minister together with the teams, the Health Secretary and etc., talking about the new variant Omicron. Maybe it's not really that much heard in Indonesia at the moment. I don't know how it is, but I have families who are doctors working with COVID cases tirelessly from the beginning of the pandemic. So soon maybe will be another wave in Indonesia. As of yesterday evening in the UK, it's already almost 560 cases of Omicron, and it will be increasing and increasing more soon. So last week we were informed there was, we have new variant, but there's nothing we know about the variant so far. So it's still okay. You can still celebrate Christmas. You can still meet each other, but stay alert and stay safe. So we don't know what does it mean by stay alert and stay safe from the beginning of the pandemic. And another case is came up where public trust is even more destroyed because the number 10 decided to host a party within the pandemic. So the public question is then whether the rules for around COVID is only apply to the wider public, but not to the number 10, which is the residence of the Prime Minister. So so in the pandemic, as I read a lot of literatures on pandemic and crisis, goes back to Ellen mentioned earlier the Spain flu and the Hurricane Katrina and etc. Crisis like COVID, but COVID indeed is much more massive in terms of its impact to the public health, employment, economic and social protection, all levels of human life. And I went through different readings. Unfortunately, there's a little that we know about accountability during crisis. And it's very rare. If you go to accounting literature, maybe it's not so much. And I went to the public administration literature. It's rarely discussed. So people start to write about who is going to be accountable in crisis. Can we hold government to account for the crisis, or perhaps the corporation? And so still questioning about who is actually or who should be accountable during crisis. So Carl Wick described this kind of situation as a cosmological episode where everyone, including the leaders, most importantly here, experience profound confusion. They don't know what to do. They can't make sense of what is happening. If I could jump back to my project in Indonesia, from the early analysis that we've conducted, even the philanthropic organization was aware more about the impact of crisis because they used to deal with different crises and then also disasters throughout times compared to the government, where the government hasn't ready for the crisis to happen. Philanthropic organization was there already 1 year before when the COVID was just heard in Wuhan, and even the Indonesian government, for example, think, oh, you can just drink herbs and you will be safe with COVID. But philanthropic organization in Indonesia at that time has been, oh, there will be a great disaster ahead. So what should we plan? And go back to the UK, even until today, they still open the border. So with opening the border, then new variants comes, be it Delta and Omicron, and who knows what would be the next variant. So having lots of family from the medical background, I've learned a lot about how how able this virus to mutate in the society. And even if you have COVID and it doesn't give you so much impact in terms of your health, then there is a huge potential for the mutations, and a new variant will come out afterwards. So until today, the UK government hasn't even closed the border or restrict the border as many other countries do. So what we learn as well is how in different literature we can learn that Seeger and Selno, for example, and Boyne recently in 2021, this is all from public administration literature, talking about how leaders suffer from loss of sense-making ability and fail to execute professional judgment. If we look at, I'd like to look, all of us to look at the middle picture here about care home in the UK. So this is an interesting and yet very sad story about care home in the UK. It compared to the discussion in BBC recently, citing the government of Hong Kong. So in Hong Kong, there is no impact of COVID or perhaps death in the care home in the UK. Why that was the case? Because in Hong Kong, when the elderly in the care home got COVID, they will keep them in the hospital for 3 months to ensure it doesn't have any impact to other elderly in the care homes. In the UK, on the contrary, in the beginning of the pandemic, the care home didn't even inform or wasn't informed at all, and or even give an alert if the quote is stay alert, stay safe. There wasn't even alerted about the impact of COVID. The care homes, managers, they try to learn from what happened in Spain, what happened in other countries, and try to put up different measures themselves. But there is nothing whatsoever from the government to let them know what should happen and what would happen to the elderly. I don't know if you are aware with the news in the beginning of the pandemic, where we can see that a lot of elderlies got ill. And I've also learned from interacting with the communities, those who work in the care home, if they got COVID, they have to work anyway. So I knew several people personally in the neighborhood where they work in the care home, but they have no choice but to still work despite the danger of maybe passing the virus to the elderly. And also in the same case with the NHS, one of people whom I know personally work in the kitchen of the NHS hospital, and he got COVID and he still has to come. Can you imagine if that person then handle the food and pass to the patient, what would happen? But they have to leave. If they don't work, they can't have money for them to sustain the family, let alone a month, maybe for the day or the week. So there's no options, even though furlough is there, but furlough is not always For those of you who don't know furlough, because there's no furlough in Indonesia, so for those who in the beginning of the pandemic until maybe mid of last year, the government introduced furlough for those who work from home. The government will cover 80% of the salary or the wages of those who work from home. So this thing what happened, but and then go back to the care home when the elderly more and more got admitted to the hospital. I think in the mid of 2020, the government introduced a scheme where the care home, if they bring the elderly back to the care home, each of the elderly, they will give £1,000 to care for them. And you can see the impact on them. In the end of, in the beginning of 2021, the government started to shift the discussion. Oh, there's a lot of debts, increasing around the spending on care homes. So when in the beginning there wasn't even alerted, or there wasn't even put in the picture of how would be the impact on the pandemic, in the end, when it comes to the government spending and the costs incurred because of COVID, the care home become one of the biggest costs that the government admitted to be part of the impact of crisis. If we look at, I put another picture here on corporation. How is it the government put forward their attention to corporation as opposed to the wider public? So any of you who perhaps have an experience in the UK or visited the UK must know Debenhams. In the past, maybe Firdaus is the biggest store in the Birmingham shop in the city center, but they decided to close down. And there is no discussion whatsoever or anything that the government could do to prevent, because the impact of it is huge in terms of people losing their jobs and etc. But in another context which I didn't put here, Debenhams is actually has been experiencing losses in the past 10 years, even before the pandemic. So they could get the benefit of saving up their asset in different ways, closing the store, moving to online, and it's easy for them. And the government would introduce so many schemes for the businesses during the pandemic, arguing that if they save the businesses, then it will save the jobs and people could still retain their job and etc. If we look at again, for example, in the housing sectors, so many different schemes were introduced. For example, the stamp duty exemptions, for example, for those who are buying and purchasing or selling houses during the pandemic. The government argued this is to keep the housing sector to be not too impacted by crisis so much. So stamp duty tax for those of you in Indonesia is similar to what we call it, Firdaus, if you sell some kind of tax, if we sell and buy houses in Indonesia, but there's quite a lot depending. And the government at that time, up to September 2021, exempt the purchase or the sales of houses up to £500,000. But who is benefiting from this? Is it the wider public? If they lost their jobs and etc., of course they won't be able to buy houses, let alone buying houses. Maybe retaining their form of or lifestyle before the pandemic might be difficult. Then those who could benefit from this are those who have more capital, those of corporation that again and again buying more houses for letting and etc. So and undermining those who still need housing. I also, with colleagues in the UK, do research on social housing, and the impact of COVID on social housing is very devastating. If you know, those who live under social housing, or those who cannot afford to have their houses, the government provide some kind of benefits for them to have shelter, called social housing, administered by a non-profit organization, but again and again becoming more profitable in terms of its activities, called registered social landlord, or formerly known as housing association, who run this social housing. I've been following the activisms of social housing's tenants in the past 2 years during crisis. If this is not even covered by the news so much in the UK, there's a lot of deaths in this social housing in the high tower in the UK because of COVID. It's not only because of COVID, but other things, where housing association or registered social landlords activities are impacted so much by COVID, and the reducing grants from the government is even more increasing, or was already there before COVID, and it becomes more severe in terms of their financial support. Then they have to pass the financial impact to the social housing tenant. They implement what they call as grid heating, or cluster heating, some kind of different terms they use, or block heating, meaning that they would only turn on the heating and electricity at a certain times. And then the issue with cladding, or the quality of the housing, that leads to the poor environment where they live, or the social housing tenants live, and that increase the chance for them to get COVID and the death of COVID because there's no help for them. So also another problem in the society in terms of the poor, a lot more people are losing their job and they won't be able to feed their children properly. And in the right hand side on my screen here, you can see this is what someone put it on a Twitter. This is what I have to feed my family for and my children for the next 2 weeks. And they rely, because they're losing their job, they rely on food bank and etc. And the food bank are mainly run by non-profit organization, the groups among the community rather than the government itself. Yes, each council perhaps would provide some sort of help, but this is not enough considering the huge impact of this pandemic. So we can see here that the accountability crisis, and it's not even in the picture how the government should be accountable, let alone being accountable, how they should react and make sense of their decision, and to whom their decision should be way more compared to others in this context is whether the concentration on corporations and businesses as opposed to the public or vice versa. And the pandemic continues. It has a lot more impact and induce more failures of accountability regimes, not only at the government level, but at different contexts. With COVID, there is something that has been undermined even up to today, how long COVID impacted a lot of people in the UK, I've joined the long COVID group from the beginning of the pandemic in Facebook and Instagram, just to see how they've been going through and suffering throughout the pandemic. So they call for long COVID to be treated as disability, because most of them then ended to lose their job because they can't work properly anymore. The government introduced some kinds of clinics for long COVID. I personally have a young friend. He's still 35. We care for him from the point because simply their family are far away. So we are the closest family he has actually from the beginning. He's very healthy, 35 years old young man that get long COVID up to today, impacted his liver and etc. up to today. And this has happened to so many people. I think in the mid of last year, maybe around 500,000 people got impacted of COVID or long COVID or around the world, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe in Indonesia, it's not so much long COVID cases, because long COVID is an impact of untreated COVID from the very beginning. So they call for the government to look at it as a disability. They call for people to sign the petition, but up to today, even the clinic the NHS introduced for long COVID doesn't even functioning. Yes, they could sign up for it, but there's not much help they could offer, or the NHS could offer for them up to today. And at the same time, the condition gone worse with the cuts of benefits, or those who receive funding from the government. With the cuts of the benefits, there's a lot of benefits as a welfare country that the UK government introduced, such as child benefits and another benefits. They cut the benefits substantially so far, and then the impact is rather than working, because if they work, they have to get the benefits even more reduced. So a lot of impact then goes into the corporation as well. It's very difficult for companies to get people to work now. There's a shortage of workforce in the UK and etc. And also, it becomes wider and wider the impact of COVID for the housing, for example. That's a lot of, this is one of the things I observed so far, where tenants, not only social housing tenants, but also private tenants are calling for the government to look at the issues and the impact on how the losses that corporation and housing associations in the context of housing sector in the UK pass or perhaps shifted to the tenants so far. So we then move to how it is in terms of the corporation in the UK, and how it got severe and severe for people in the UK to live nowadays. So recently we have shortage, not only shortage of workforce, but the shortage of workforce then impacted on the gas prices. There were a time maybe in the past 6 months, we have energy shortage where people the first time since I live in the UK, or perhaps Alan never saw it when he was still in the UK, people are queuing so long for getting petrol in the petrol stations, and that becomes I don't have any evidence, but that induce the governments to then open up the cap for the price of petrols. Now this is what the picture over here. We can see the price of petrol, and in the UK, 1.47, 1.49 for today if we want to buy petrol. In the past, when Firdaus was still, because Firdaus used to live in front of the petrol station when he was in Birmingham. So maybe it's 98, 99 at that time. Now it's 1.47 per liter of the petrol. It's huge. And when the petrol price increases, then you call for another inflation in different levels, cost of living become increases, the cost of food and etc. People get more difficult and difficult to fulfill their daily life. Many families now rely on food bank because they cannot afford the increase of prices. The reason from the last few months as the impact of COVID, a lot of energy companies, the small energy companies, we used to have a lot of energy companies where we can compare prices and we can switch from one company to the other. Now most of them are closed down and we are left with only few energy companies. Then the bill of the energy bill soaring so much. I personally used to pay like 110 per month for gas and electricity. Now I have to pay 250 so per month. That's for 1 month. So and many people have to live without energy, have to live without gas and get cold and etc. because of they cannot afford it. So where is the government in this picture? We look at here, this is the post that Rishi Sunak, one of the cabinet minister in the UK that deal with financial aspect of the government, decided to provide a tax cut for corporation, arguing that by providing a tax cut, they will encourage investment. This is not something new for all of us in Indonesia. Perhaps this is also happening in Indonesia, where the government focuses more on the businesses. This is again another accountability failures that we can see at the corporate sector. I want to then move to what we've seen and how it is the impact on audit. This is what I've seen. We've seen the impact on corporation and how corporations shift the impact on COVID to be it customers in the context of housing sector, the tenants and etc. But in how is it we can look at it from the audit work. So we look at all companies by with the funding of FRC. We received 45,000 to look at the audit report. So we look at all companies in total maybe 500 companies, if I'm not mistaken. So all in FTSE, those companies listed in FTSE 250, FTSE 100, and AM. AM is those small, medium companies or small, medium enterprises. What we looked at is, this is still very preliminary findings. So there's a less comprehensive report. The structure, the ease to navigate between different parts of the report is decreasing. For example, I reviewed a Standard Chartered audit report in 2019 to 2020. So previously, Standard Chartered was audited by KPMG, and in 2020 they have audited change. So this is my slide at the moment is based on companies who experience auditors change. So from KPMG to EY, the structure, the ease to navigate between one part of the reports to the other is so a lower quality of audit, the lower quality of audit, as we know, maybe Firdaus knows more. And then in the private sector, it depends on how the contract between the companies and the auditor, to what extent they wanted the auditor to review and the cost of audit itself. And we also saw a drastic change on the quality of report for the online fashion retailer, such as Boohoo and etc., and moved to an unknown accounting firms to audit them. So this is maybe reflecting the challenges the companies faced during COVID, because perhaps
3 minutes left.
Okay, thank you, Hadini. So, and also in interviews and further exploration. And also we saw a sign of boilerplate. If any of you are aware of, or maybe less aware of boilerplate, meaning that they copy the report. So we saw a sign of boilerplate and audit report, despite of auditing BDO, for example, auditing insurance company and investment company, but the report and the scope and the way they measure the materiality, despite different contexts and different client sector, is exactly the same. And there's a change and benchmarks and few reports on climate change. There's also impact on Islamic financial institution. I have done a research in the past with Alan as well. I have a paper published in Journal of Business Ethics on this, where I reviewed the life of 14 years of Islamic Bank in the UK, where they changed their ethical identity from Sharia compliance to something that may be similar to a conventional bank. And after COVID or during COVID, it's even worse. Now they lost the internal Sharia compliance. It no longer exists, and Sharia audit is no longer in the agenda as well. So where is the ethical identity? So the Sharia audit and Sharia compliance assurance is no longer in the picture anymore. So to close the session, I would like to pick up the accountability gap report produced by International Budget Partnership Survey on 120 countries. They're basically confirming what I've explained earlier in the previous slides, where the government failed to adopt the key measures to enhance accountability, severe lack of reporting on how the policy decision making, the procurement procedure, and then the timely audit report, the gender impact, accounting for gender impact. There is a lack of interaction with public and inadequate public input on government decision and fiscal policy. And this is the feature that I have. I actually put this, Stillman recently wrote a paper on how to govern the complex disaster. It's still very, very, I would say, conceptual, but this is nice on the paper, but whether this could be implemented, that's a huge question mark, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nunu, for the presentation. Yes, it's really interesting, yeah, Dr. Nunu, for the presentation. How about the pandemic there in UK? How devastating the news that in the care home, yeah, it's really broken our heart too. Actually, in Indonesia, we also struggling in this pandemic, not only for the health care, or such as doctor and nurses, but also we all as the community in Indonesia that underdeveloped and struggling and every month to sustain their life, right? No longer do. This is the session for the question and answer. Yes, it's interesting session. And Panitia here already, I mean like, yes, already prepare the slide. Yeah. Actually, it's really a lot of the question in the chat room, Dr. Nunung and also Dr. Firdaus. I'm so sorry that Prof. Alan have like urgency agenda, so Prof. Alan cannot wait until the question and answer. He said very sorry that cannot join for this question and answer, but all the attendees question trying to answer by Prof. Alan in the chat room. And later on, if the question from attendee not yet being answered by Prof. Alan, we will ask for his permission, maybe answer it in email or something, yeah, after this event. Now the answer and question. Both of the speakers have two questions that we already compiled. First question, I would like to ask to Dr. Firdaus. Sorry, I need to change my screen first. Yes, the attendee that question to Dr. Firdaus is Mr. Franz, Ms. Hanifah Maulida, Mr. Farhan Fauzanul Insani, Mr. Salman, and also Mr. Muhammad Noval. The question is, as we know, the AI machine will disappear several jobs in the future. And we see some apps replace the accountant works. Now, how do you think, Dr. Firdaus, that job as accountant can be exist in the future? Even AI machine can be written. And then are all countries is ready to face this cultural change? And will the auditor profession be much more needed or will it be less? Please the answer, Dr. Firdaus. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hardini. Yeah, I would like to answer this question. I think it's a really great question. And then, as I mentioned before, in my opinion, in the short term, job loss associated with the implementation of AI technologies will be relatively slow and marginal. Why? Because these technologies replace only specific tasks, not the entire jobs of accountants and auditors. So accounting and auditing still require professional judgment, for example, interpretation that robots cannot do. That's an example of how we can still exist. And accounting still involve interpreting results for top managers, board of directors, and so on. Then a robot cannot do that. And the main advantage of artificial intelligence is that accountants don't need to do repetitive and low judgment tasks anymore. They can focus on tasks that require professional judgment. I always tell my students, don't worry that you will be replaced by robots, by machines, because until now, robots cannot do professional judgment as accountants do. So what you need to do is to expand your knowledge, learn IT, learn big data analytics, blockchain, computer program, etc. And you will still succeed as an accountant in the future. Although accountants may no longer be the owner of the accounting database, as traditional accounting that they keep the books of accounting, they will continue to validate the policies and the entire procedure. So they exercise analyzing, judging subjective values, and balance remains necessary. So accountants, this is another advantage that need to work with data scientists, computer programs, and other professions for the sake of their company. So I don't worry about that because in my opinion, it will not disappear shortly. So what you need to do is expand your knowledge, learn anything. And then I think it's the same problem in other countries in the world because, as you know, there are advanced emerging technologies in all over the world. So I think we have the same problem. And then don't worry because we still have to seek our best, our knowledge in order not to be replaced by the machine. I think that's my answer, Hardini.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Firdaus. I'm truly agree with your answer, Dr. Firdaus, which is the accountant, which also accounting students, no need to be worried about the profession of accountant will be replaced by AI machine, because we still have roles as accountant to, make adaptation for these changes, such as, try to adapt with the IT, and then try to adapt with the another skills that needed in terms of this era. Thank you, Dr. Firdaus, for the first question. Now the second question, please, Panitia, is the question from Mr. Didit Pradipto. The question specifically asking about how are we in the education area should react and anticipate. What I mean is, how are we supposed to prepare for our accounting student in the classroom, probably with additional subject or changing curriculum? Please, for the answer.
Yeah, it's very great questions, interesting question from Mr. Didit. This is how the government developed a new educational system called Merdeka Belajar Kampus Merdeka, or we can translate it in English, freedom to learn. So it means that it gives flexibility to students to choose their knowledge outside their faculty. So student of accounting can learn IT from the faculty of IT. So I think it's a good idea from the government to challenge the future developments of technologies. So and then the curriculum will be adjusted and revised in order to adapt these new skills and roles for the accountant. So I think my answer is yes. We need to, as a lecturer, as a practitioners, we need to revise our curriculum, adapting to the new technology, and accountant can freely can have a freedom to learn any subjects outside their accounting competencies. That's it, Miss Hardini. Thank you.
May I add to that? So I think we've learned from what Ellen presented today on climate change, and what I partly presented on how the impact of crisis impacted the accounting work and auditors' work as well. So I think, we need to educate accounting students more than accounting classic. What I mean by accounting classic here is the mechanistic accounting. They need to be aware on climate change and socio-political impact as well. When I was doing accountancy back in 1994, so that's when I do my undergrad, so it's showing how old I am now. So we still learn socio-political science. We learn about culture, be it Islamic culture or the Indonesian culture. And it's very important for them to understand, because when accountant work, it's not only a matter of crunching the numbers. It's about which Firdaus mentioned earlier as decision making, and decision making. Accountant needs to put themselves within the society. What would be the impact to the society if I made such decision? For example, if I could reflect in the UK, if you want to work, any of you study in the UK and want to work in accounting firms, most of accounting firms took they hire people from outside accounting, from political science, from sociology, from other discipline, because training accounting is simple. It's you just, if you recruit a smart student, train them for 6 months, they knew about accounting. So if you want to sustain yourself as an accountant in the future, then you need to expand yourself on different aspects of corporate lives. Corporate lives is not only crunching the numbers, it's about political decision, how the political influence affect the decision making, how do you put yourself within the wider socio-political context, the impact on environment, and etc. I think that I want to add for what Firdaus has explained earlier.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Nunung, for the additional answer that I'm truly agree. The accounting students need to enhance and enrich their capabilities, not only within accounting topics, but also the present day. What is the present day happen, and then the global warming, and then the carbon pricing, the SDG sustainability. They have to aware all of that, and not only limited their skills on accounting, but also enlarge it to another field such as social and something. Thank you, Dr. Nunung. Now the third and the fourth question is precisely for Dr. Nunung. The first question is from Miss Dania Hoirunisa.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I think I've answered that in the chat when Alan was presenting it. Yeah. So I pretty much cover in my previous points as well. So maybe we could skip that.
Okay. Then the last question then. The second question from Mr. Zaidan Fauzan to Dr. Nunung. Hi, Dr. Nurul. During the COVID-19 pandemic that has occurred in the last 2 years, why do the government and reporting standard setting institution seem less responsive in compiling a comprehensive report?
Yeah, I think it's an easy answer because they don't know what to do. They never experienced this huge and massive, and some different government behave differently. There are countries leaders who are very sophisticated or perhaps careful in responding to this. Alan left already, but he now lives in Auckland. He can compare how the policy or perhaps decision making took place in New Zealand compared to Australia. I live in the UK, and I could compare how it is in Indonesia and in the UK. So but the same thing that we could draw a line is how unprepared they are. So as an accountant, go back to the accountant, shifting from government and us as accountant, how do we account for unprepared risk? So and how do we prepare ourselves as an accountant to account for the impact of unprepared risk? So that could be something we explore further. So far from my research on the role of philanthropic organization, they are much aware because they deal with disasters and the impact of disasters all the time. But whether the government is aware to talk with them or learn from them on how to deal with disaster and crisis, and perhaps learning from the crisis recovery plan that philanthropic organization had offered so far. I don't think they will. The arrogance and even to as I mentioned earlier in the UK now, from last night, since I look at Twitter, and then there's a lot of hashtag called "We don't comply." We say no to comply. So they simply, because the new rules put up last night is to work from home, put your mask on. So many discussion around. Around this is only a trap, this is about to control the population, and etc. and etc. Those who are against vaccine and etc. becoming even more, because there's inconsistency in terms of decision making, inconsistency in terms of the lack of clarity. You say the Omicron is here, there is a huge danger, but what is the danger is still unknown. So how can you explain oh, Hardini, don't go there. There is a danger there, but I didn't tell you what it's the danger all about and what would you face up there. So how can I trust you that there is a danger up there without explaining? The Omicron impact is yet to know. So what is the impact then? So that's the other thing. Even I think the UK what is successful compared to the other countries is the vaccination. So the vaccination now, the government has rolled up booster vaccine since September. So now reach to the age of 40 or those below 40 who are in critical condition or has a critical illness. So there could be, I personally had booster already. My husband, my son, and my daughter will come soon. So this is good. But if you are inconsistent, then people would, or those who are against the government agenda would then come back, oh, this is all about business. How? And if I go back to my earlier point in the first slides, whether the government putting more attention to the wider public or the businesses, which one they put the way more in terms of their aids and their attention and the decision making they made.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nunung, for the answer. This is the last session of our agenda, which is a question and answer session. And from the panitia said that I need input from Dr. Nunung and also Dr. Firdaus, which one? 3 attendees that have the best question, because we have some like gift voucher 100,000 rupiah for each of them. So please, Dr. Nunung, do you have?
I have no idea. Maybe it's good to pick up for me. It's not fair for me to say one over the other.
1 or 2 names. It's okay.
Yeah. Maybe just give it to the student. I think they deserve more.
Yeah, I think so. I don't remember the name of the person who raised
maybe the one that I already answered, Dania, maybe. She's a student, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
You can choose to other, Bu Nurul.
Yeah. Oh, to others. I see.
Three person, right? 3 people.
Where is it? I don't know. We can
scroll it too.
Yeah. So maybe to where is it? Pak Aang Munawar. So I think I got a message from him as well.
Yes.
So he's attending. Yeah.
The first one.
And Firdaus could choose the third one.
Okay, my turn. I think Muhammad Noval, the same name, Muhammad Noval Firdaus. It's because of not because of the same name, but it's his question is quite interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So one name again.
One more.
One more. So Bapak Aang Munawar.
Yes.
And then Dania, and then who is it? Noval, yeah.
Muhammad Noval, yeah.
Okay. So we have 3 lucky attendees that will get gift from IB Kesatuan. Congratulations. And now is the end of the discussion and also question and answer session. Thank you for Dr. Nunung, Dr. Firdaus that already here present the presentation to the attendees all. And I will return to Mr. Diva as Master of Ceremony. I return this event to you. Thank you. Please, Mr. Diva.
Right. Yeah, you're welcome, Mr. Hardini. Thank you very much also that have been carried out by the amazing speakers and closed with a fairly exciting question and answer from the audience. All right, so the next agenda is the presentation of certificates to speakers. Please to Vice Rector IB Kesatuan, Ibu Dr. Sutarti, SAMM, SIS, to submit a certificate to Professor Alan Lowe and Dr. Nurul Hidayah, and also Mr. Firdaus Amyar, Ph.D. Silakan Ibu Dr. Sutarti.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. Thank you for Professor Alan Lowe, Dr. Nurul Hidayah, and Dr. Firdaus Amyar, who has agreed to be a speaker at this international guest lecturer event on behalf of the Institut Bisnis Informatika Kesatuan Vocational Program. Here we present a certificate as a thank you and appreciation for Professor Alan Lowe, Dr. Nurul Hidayah, and Dr. Firdaus Amyar, who has given a lot of knowledge to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Alan Lowe, also Dr. Nurul Hidayah, and also thank you very much also for Mr. Firdaus Amyar, PhD. So at the end of this session, let's take a group photo shot. Please to all audiences to turn on the video because our officer will do a screenshot as a photo shot. Baik, kepada hadirin Bapak Ibu serta rekan-rekan yang saya hormati, dimohon ya untuk menyalakan kamera karena sebentar lagi panitia akan melakukan sesi pemotretan. Oke, baik, kita lakukan pemotretan dengan aba-aba dari saya. 1, 2, 3. Sekali lagi dengan gaya bebas. 1, 2, 3. Oke.
Okay, thank you. I have to leave now.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi
Waalaikumsalam
wabarakatuh.
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, finally, by saying Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin, this international guest lecture for accounting session will be closed. Hopefully, this will benefit for all of us. And also, again, I would like to say thank you very much for all of you, especially Rector of IB Kesatuan, Professor Dr. Haji Murul Mahdi, Surya Janegara, SAMM, AK, CPA, CA, CSP, ASEAN CPA. And also, thank you very much for Professor Alan Lowe, Dr. Nurul Hidayah, and Mr. Firdaus Amyar, PhD, as speakers, and also Ms. Hardiani as moderator today. And of course, thank you very much for all of audiences of the International Guest Lecture for Accounting Session. Thank you very much for being with us and see you again. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.